Table 47 sat precisely where my sister Ananya had intended, tucked behind the catering station, next to the service doors that led to the dumpsters behind the Grand Palace Hotel's ballroom. From my seat, I had an excellent view of waitstaff rushing back and forth with dirty dishes and an aromatic preview of every course before it reached the important guests seated at the front of the room. "Maya, I put you back there for a reason," Ananya had explained that morning during final seating arrangements, her tone carrying the particular condescension she reserved for family members who threatened her carefully constructed image. "Government clerks don't really mix well with Rajesh's business associates and my law firm partners." Government clerk. For 18 months, my family had assumed my position in the Prime Minister's office involved filing papers and answering phones, despite my attempts to explain the difference between administrative support and senior policy advisory roles. They had no interest in understanding that government work could involve anything more sophisticated than bureaucratic paperwork. The wedding reception buzzed with 300 guests celebrating Ananya's marriage to Rajesh Mehta, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune and her ticket to the social prominence she'd craved since childhood. I watched from my exile near the kitchen as she worked the room in her designer lehenga, ensuring everyone understood the significance of her new family connections. "Maya's the quiet one," I heard her explaining to a table of her law colleagues. "She's always been more comfortable with simple work than ambitious career goals. Very sweet, but not really cut out for competitive environments. Simple work." Yesterday I'd spent 6 hours in classified briefings about trade negotiations that would affect India's economic relationships with 12 different countries. This morning I'd reviewed intelligence reports about cyber threats targeting government infrastructure. But to my family, I remained the underachiever who'd settled for stable employment, instead of pursuing law or business like my successful sister. Table 47's other occupants included elderly relatives nobody quite knew how to place, Rajesh's childhood nanny, and 2 family friends who'd fallen out of favor with the bride's mother. We were the social overflow, the people whose presence was required but whose visibility needed to be minimized. "At least the food's good," whispered Aunt Kamala, who'd been relegated to our table after making inappropriate comments about Ananya's pre-wedding festivities. "Though I can't see anything happening up front." Neither could I. The head table sat elevated on a small platform where Ananya and Rajesh received congratulations from an endless parade of important people, politicians, business leaders, and social figures who represented the elevated circles my sister intended to join through marriage. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Dr. Sharma, situation developing with the trade summit. PM requests immediate consultation. Security detail en route to your location." Dr. Sharma. The advanced degree in international relations I'd completed while building my career in government service was something my family had never shown interest in discussing. Like most aspects of my professional life, they dismissed it as additional training for clerk work. I glanced around the ballroom, noting the subtle increase in security presence that accompanied high-level government officials. Most guests wouldn't notice the additional staff positioned near entrances, or the communication equipment being discreetly installed by personnel who looked like hotel technicians. At 8:30 p.m. during the dinner service I spotted the advance team. Men and women in formal attire whose carefully concealed earpieces and coordinated movements marked them as protection details rather than wedding guests. "Maya, what's that commotion near the entrance?" asked Uncle Ravi from across our marginalized table. "Probably hotel security," I replied, though I recognized the staging patterns that preceded VIP arrivals at the highest levels of government. "Security for what? This is just a wedding reception." Before I could respond, the hotel's communications manager approached our table with the purposeful stride of someone delivering important information to someone who mattered much more than their seating arrangement suggested. "Dr. Sharma? The Prime Minister has arrived and requests an immediate word with you." The silence that followed his announcement was so complete I could hear the ice machine cycling in the service area behind us. "The Prime Minister?" Uncle Ravi's voice cracked with confusion. "Maya, what is he talking about?" Around the ballroom, other guests had begun noticing the increased security presence and the obvious importance of whatever was developing. Conversations grew quieter as people tried to understand why government officials were arriving at a private wedding celebration. "There must be some mistake," whispered Aunt Kamala. "Maya works in filing or something." "No mistake," the communications manager confirmed, consulting his earpiece as additional instructions came through. Dr. Sharma, if you could come with me immediately. The walk from table 47 to the ballroom's main entrance felt like crossing a minefield, with every step drawing increasing attention from wedding guests who couldn't reconcile my previous insignificance with the obvious importance of whatever was happening. Behind me, I could hear confused murmurs about Maya and government officials, and what's going on? Ananya's expression had shifted from bridal radiance to something approaching panic as she watched me being escorted through her carefully orchestrated reception by personnel whose presence suggested events far beyond her control. Paya. Her voice carried across the ballroom with an edge of desperation. Where are you going? What's happening? Before I could respond, the Prime Minister's security detail had positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the reception space, their coordinated movements creating the secure perimeter that accompanied India's highest elected official wherever he appeared. At the ballroom's entrance, I met with the PM's chief of staff, who briefed me quickly on the situation requiring immediate consultation. Intelligence agencies intercepted communications suggesting coordinated attacks on trade summit locations. Your expertise on international security protocols is needed immediately. My expertise on international security protocols had been developed through 3 years of classified briefings and policy development work that my family had never understood as anything more significant than paperwork for the government. How long will this take? I asked, glancing back toward the wedding reception where guests had abandoned their dinner service to watch the unfolding drama. 20 minutes for immediate consultation, but the PM specifically asked to address the wedding guests before departing. He wanted to acknowledge your contributions publicly. Public acknowledgement. For 18 months, I'd maintained operational security by allowing my family to believe I held a minor clerical position rather than explaining my actual role in developing policies that affected international relations. Is that necessary? The PM was quite insistent. Apparently, he feels that your family should understand the significance of your service to the country. Through the ballroom doors, I could see Ananya standing beside her new husband, both looking increasingly anxious as they tried to manage a wedding reception that had been interrupted by the arrival of government officials seeking their supposedly insignificant family member. The 20-minute consultation took place in the hotel's executive conference room, where secure communications allowed real-time coordination with intelligence agencies and international partners. The situation was serious but manageable, requiring policy adjustments that I'd been developing for months in anticipation of such scenarios. When we returned to the ballroom, dinner service had stopped entirely. 300 guests sat in expectant silence, trying to understand why the Prime Minister of India had arrived at a private wedding reception to consult with someone they'd assumed was a low-level government employee. Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister's voice carried clearly through the ballroom sound system as he approached the main microphone. I apologize for interrupting your celebration, but urgent matters of national security required consultation with one of my most trusted advisors. Most trusted advisors. I felt my stomach tighten as the implications of his words registered with my family and the wedding guests who'd spent the evening treating me as insignificant background presence. Dr. Maya Sharma has spent the past 3 years developing critical policies that protect India's interests in international negotiations and security matters. Her expertise has prevented several potential crises that could have seriously damaged our nation's strategic position. From my position near the entrance, I could see Ananya's face draining of color as she processed the revelation that her underachieving sister held a position of significant responsibility in the highest levels of government. Dr. Sharma's work remains largely classified, which is why her contributions haven't received public recognition until now. But tonight seems like an appropriate opportunity to acknowledge someone whose dedication has served our country with distinction. The applause started hesitantly from guests who weren't sure how to react to learning that the person they'd dismissed as unimportant was actually being praised by the Prime Minister for classified government service. Dr. Sharma, would you join me for a moment? The walk from the ballroom entrance to the elevated platform where moments before Ananya had been receiving congratulations felt like crossing into a different universe. Behind me, 300 wedding guests watched in stunned silence as their assumptions about family hierarchies crumbled in real time. Your family should be very proud, the Prime Minister said, his words reaching every corner of the ballroom where relatives sat in various stages of shock and confusion. Table 47, where I'd been seated next to the dumpsters, seemed very far away. Standing beside the Prime Minister on the platform that had been constructed for my sister's wedding celebration, I could see the entire ballroom spread out below us. 300 guests whose evening had been transformed from family celebration to lesson in the dangers of making assumptions about people's significance. Dr. Sharma's policy recommendations have shaped India's approach to several critical international relationships, the Prime Minister continued, his words carrying the weight of classified information being revealed for the first time. Her analysis prevented economic agreements that would have cost our nation billions in unfavorable trade arrangements. At table 47, where I'd been seated with social outcasts and forgotten relatives, Aunt Kamala sat with her mouth open, apparently trying to reconcile the person she thought she knew with the government official being praised for preventing billion-dollar mistakes. The cybersecurity protocols Dr. Sharma developed have protected our financial institutions from sophisticated attacks originating from hostile nations. Her work operates at classification levels that prevent public discussion, but tonight's emergency consultation involved protecting assets worth hundreds of billions of rupees. Hundreds of billions of rupees. Through the crowd, I could see Ananya's expression shifting from confusion to something approaching horror as she realized that her simple government clerk sister was being credited with protecting national assets worth more than entire industries. Dr. Sharma, I should also mention that next month's state dinner will include formal recognition of your contributions to national security. The President specifically requested that your family be invited as guests of honor. The President. Family as guests of honor. I watched my parents' faces as they processed the implications of their daughter receiving presidential recognition while they'd spent years offering career advice about finding more ambitious work. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in recognizing Dr. Maya Sharma's exceptional service to our nation. The applause this time was thunderous, driven by guests who were beginning to understand the magnitude of their misconceptions about my professional standing. Through the crowd, I spotted Rajesh's father, the pharmaceutical magnate who'd been introduced as the evening's most important guest, applauding someone he'd probably dismissed entirely. Dr. Sharma, thank you for your immediate response tonight. The nation is grateful for your continued dedication. As the Prime Minister concluded his remarks and prepared for departure, the ballroom gradually returned to conversation, though the energy had fundamentally changed. Guests who had ignored my presence now approached with business cards and expressions of newfound respect. Paya. Ananya's voice cut through the crowd as she pushed through wedding guests toward the platform. Why didn't you tell us about your position? We had no idea you worked on classified matters. You never asked about my work beyond government filing, I replied, accepting congratulations from strangers who minutes earlier hadn't known I existed. But we're family. You should have explained that you held such important responsibilities. I tried to explain. You weren't interested in details about bureaucratic paperwork. The truth hung between us like smoke from a fire she'd never seen coming. Around the ballroom, relatives who'd treated me as the family disappointment now scrambled to understand how they'd so completely misunderstood my place in the world. The wedding reception continued, but the celebration had become something entirely different. Less about Ananya's social elevation and more about the discovery that the most important person in the room had been seated by the dumpsters. The wedding reception never recovered its original energy. Guests spent the remainder of the evening approaching me with questions about government service and international policy, while my family struggled to reconcile their assumptions with the reality of my professional significance. Presidential recognition? Mom repeated for the third time, reviewing the state dinner information I'd shown them. Maya, how long have you been working at this level? 3 years, I replied, watching Ananya attempt damage control with her new in-laws, who were clearly reassessing their daughter-in-law's family connections. The immediate consequences were both predictable and satisfying. Rajesh's pharmaceutical family, who'd spent the evening networking with other business leaders, suddenly wanted detailed discussions about trade policies affecting their industry. Wedding guests who'd pitted my modest government position asked about consulting opportunities and policy insights. But Uncle Ravi's assumption that family connection meant automatic access to classified information met with security clearance requirements that family relationships couldn't override. And Ananya's expectation that my prominence would enhance her legal career discovered that government positions don't create networking opportunities for civilian family members. 3 weeks later, the state dinner made national headlines with photos of my family as presidential guests. Ananya learned about it the same way her law firm colleagues did, by reading news coverage that identified her as the sister of Dr. Maya Sharma. The seating chart from her wedding remains in my government office, a reminder that the most important conversations sometimes happen in the places where people assume nothing significant could possibly occur. Sometimes the best view in the room is from the table nobody wants to claim.